Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to The World Today on CGTN. I'm Mahia Mutua in Nairobi. Also coming up, Burkina Faso's president detained as soldiers mutiny for a second day. The U.S. sends more weapons to Ukraine as tensions grow over Russia invasion claims. And more international aid arrives in Tonga following a devastating volcanic eruption and tsunami. Welcome to the program. Let's begin in Burkina Faso, where President Roch Kabore has reportedly been detained by mutinying soldiers. His arrest comes after heavy gunfire was reported around his residence on Sunday night in the capital, Ouagadougou. Residents reported seeing a helicopter above the president's private residence. His current whereabouts are unclear. This volatile situation in the West African country has been prompting fears of yet another coup. Frustration in Burkina Faso has been growing in recent months over deteriorating security. Elsewhere, Ukraine's defense minister Oleksiy Reznikov says the country has received a second batch of weapons from the United States. It's part of a defensive aid totaling $200 million as tensions continue at the border with Russia. Reznikov says more than 80 tons of weapons have been received. The U.S. has ordered the families of its diplomats in the Ukrainian capital, Kiev, to leave the country. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has rebuffed calls to immediately impose economic sanctions on Russia. He says doing so will undercut the West's ability to deter potential Russian aggression against Ukraine. Germany has also urged Europe and the U.S. to think carefully when considering sanctions against Russia. Michael Voss reports.
The British government has accused Russia of plotting to install a pro-Moscow figure to head Ukraine. It named him as former Ukrainian MP Yevhen Murayev, a claim he denies. Britain's Deputy Prime Minister says the UK will back Ukraine, but is unlikely to send troops.
I think it's extremely unlikely that we would do that. But what we have said is that we are already willing and engaged in training programs to support the Ukrainians defending themselves. That's absolutely right, for defensive purposes. And secondly, as I made clear, we want to make sure that the economic cost to the Kremlin of doing so is sufficiently severe that they think twice.
The EU is far from united, though. Germany's Navy chief has resigned after a recording of him emerged saying that the idea that Russia wanted to invade Ukraine was nonsense and that all President Putin wanted was respect.
Is Russia really interested to have a small, tiny strip of Ukraine soil integrated in their country? No, this is nonsense. I think Putin is probably putting pressure on it because he can do it. And he knows that if he splits the European Union. But what he really wants is respect. He wants, on eye level, he wants respect. And my God, giving someone respect is low cost.
Germany has also been criticised for blocking Estonia from sending German-origin weapons to Ukraine, though it is treating Ukrainian military casualties.
And we understand that each and every nation in NATO, in Europe, can do their part. Germany has to play some significant role. If they're not ready to provide us weapons, defensive weapons, okay, they might do something else which will help us.
The US and allies are still keen to keep talking to Russia, but Putin's insistence that Ukraine never be allowed to join NATO and that US and allied military leave Eastern Europe are demands the West says it cannot agree to. Michael Voss, CGTN, London.
Meanwhile, Russia has dismissed UK claims that Moscow is installing a supposedly pro-Kremlin leader in Ukraine and accuses Britain and NATO of escalating tensions. The British Foreign Ministry has declined to provide evidence to back its accusations. Julia Chapman reports.
The Russian Foreign Ministry has dismissed as disinformation these British claims. A spokesperson said that the UK is preparing public opinion for a large-scale provocation, possibly a military one. And she says they add evidence that it is NATO stoking tensions rather than Russia. The Russian embassy in London said the UK is trying to reassert itself after having been sidelined from the ongoing negotiations between Russia and the West, which have been led from the Western side by the United States. In the Ukrainian government, an advisor to the president said that the allegations are worth taking seriously. He said there were some questions in Ukraine over the particular figure that the UK named as the possible target of this operation to put a pro-Kremlin person in power in Ukraine. But he said that Russia does have a history of trying to prop up minor figures when it comes to trying to destabilize Ukraine. In the meantime, there are still tens of thousands of Russian troops amassed on the Ukrainian border, which the Russian government says is because there is an unfriendly atmosphere in Europe. And it is waiting for written proposals to its security demands that it has put forward. After the meeting with Antony Blinken and Sergei Lavrov on Friday, it was agreed that there would be further dialogue going forward, but certainly tensions still remain very high. Julia Chapman, CGTN, Moscow.
Now, it's been 10 days since Tonga was devastated by an undersea volcanic eruption and tsunami. The Red Cross says people in the capital are still struggling to deal with volcanic ash. Over 6,000 litres of water have reportedly been distributed on the main island, while the outer islands still lack access. Families are asking their children to stay indoors and church services have been cancelled. The disaster has also nearly destroyed the country's agriculture sector. International aid is only beginning to arrive. But the Red Cross says the tragedy has taken a toll on people's mental health. Marian Kupu has more.
I'm currently in Nuku'alofa, the capital of Tonga. As you can see behind me, there are vehicles coming and queuing. It's been busy since 8 o'clock this morning. People just driving into the Nuku'alofa area just to go to the banks to receive their financial support from their families overseas, and also to use the internet for connection to call and chat their loved ones around the world. I visited the village of Maufanga near Nuku'alofa area, and what I saw was people still cleaning up roads. They used the ashes to build road bumps to slow vehicles down for speeding.
I have a bakery, but I can't even open it now because of the ash in the bakery and my home. What I need most, besides clean water, is someone who can help me start making bread, but no one has time to work due to the ash. We've swept much of it, and we utilize it in other ways. For instance, the cars are always going too fast, so we dump it on roads as barriers to prevent cars from going too fast.
What I'm wearing now, covering my head with the scarf and also wearing a mask, this is due to the dust. So a lot of people, this is the dress code for Tongans right now as we fight and battle with ashes from the volcano.
China is looking to provide further aid to Tonga with drinking water, food and medical necessities. He Weiwei has more from Guangzhou.
China now is preparing a new round of emergency supplies to Tonga. And right behind me is the warehouse. And actually this morning, this is where the supplies are put and gathered. And actually starting from this morning, a number of trucks has arrived at this location transporting goods. As you can see, this is one of the trucks. Let's take a look what we have here. We look at the label here. Actually, we have canned pork here. This is part of the supplies, and they are all packed in boxes. And also here we see a poster provided by China. It shows that these supplies is part of the supplies provided by China Pacific Island countries reserve of emergency supplies. And this joint reserve is was established in December 2021. And also we have a slogan here written, "We are united as one under the same sun." It's written in 3 languages, in Chinese, in English, and also in the language of Tonga. And all the supplies Actually, they include 3 major categories. The first is drinking water and food, which is the most needed according to local people. And the second category is medical supplies, including, for example, masks, goggles, gloves, and protective suits. And the third category is mainly some mechanical devices like water pumps and electricity generators, which will help local people for their restoration. And all the supplies will be ready within today, and they will be sent to Tonga as soon as possible. China's efforts to help Tonga is not just in Guangdong here, but also in other places. And actually today, China's embassy in Fiji has provided also a new round of emergency supplies worth of 1 million RMB, including food, drinking water, and medical supplies. And they are just sent out this morning and will arrive in Tonga on Thursday, that's 27th of this month. And we hope that these supplies will help local people to rebuild their homeland.
The Chinese mainland has reported 18 new locally transmitted cases of COVID-19. 6 are in the capital, Beijing. Cases in Hebei and Shandong provinces are traced to the Beijing cases. Yunnan has reported 3 cases. Shanxi, Henan, Guangdong, and the port city of Tianjin have reported 1 infection each. The northwestern city of Xi'an has been downgraded entirely to low risk and has also lifted a strict lockdown. It's been battling an outbreak since early December. People who travel there must show a negative test taken within 48 hours before entry. The Beijing Winter Olympics is 11 days away now. All 3 Olympic villages have entered pre-games trials and all facilities have opened. To ensure the smooth running and lower the risks of COVID-19, all venues are under closed-loop management. The first guests were welcomed on Sunday. Over 20 delegations have checked in some of their team. Nearly 300 volunteers are in one village in Yanqing district in the northwest. The main media center is now operating full-time, serving journalists from all over the world. And that's it for this edition of The World Today. I'll be back shortly with more news from the continent in Africa Live. Thanks for watching.
This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Burkina Faso's president detained as soldiers mutiny for a second day. Deadly boat accident puts the spotlight on water transport safety in the DRC. And on the International Day of Education, we look at challenges facing students and teachers in Somalia and Sierra Leone. Hello and welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Mahia Mutua in Nairobi. Also coming up, in sports, Nigeria's Super Eagles knocked out of the Africa Cup of Nations by Tunisia. Welcome to the program. Let's begin in Burkina Faso, where President Roch Kabore has reportedly been detained by mutinying soldiers. His arrest comes after heavy gunfire was reported around his residence on Sunday night in the capital, Ouagadougou. Residents reported seeing a helicopter above the president's private residence. His current whereabouts are unclear. This volatile situation in the West African country has been prompting fears of yet another coup. Frustration in Burkina Faso has been growing in recent months over deteriorating security. Well, let's take a look at the sequence of events as they've unfolded in Burkina Faso. Anti-government protests were held there on Saturday. Then, the following day, gunfire was heard at several barracks in Ouagadougou. Soldiers were reportedly demanding the sacking of military chiefs and more resources to fight the militants. The government then came out to say the crisis had been contained. It dismissed rumors of a coup, but still on Sunday, hundreds of people came out in support of the troops. The protesters set fire to the ruling party's headquarters. Late Sunday afternoon, gunfire was heard near the presidential palace and airport. Authorities were forced to introduce a nighttime curfew. In a statement, ECOWAS said it was very concerned about the situation and expressed its solidarity with the government of Burkina Faso. Well, let's speak to Lucien Kambu Malba, who is a journalist in Burkina Faso. He's standing by on the line for us. Lucien, what are the latest updates on this developing story?
Hello, the situation is still confused in Ouagadougou, even though traffic is still going on. Right now, when I was coming here, I can see military heavily armed at the gate of the national television. And a security source gave to RFI that President Kabore was arrested and taken to Sangoulé Lamidana camp. That's what is going on now. And some shots have been also heard in some camps this morning. And some testimony gave also that yesterday during the evening time, shots were heard in Padua district where the president resides.
And Lucien, we're hearing that the mutineers are demanding better resources to fight jihadists. They also want some of the military leadership to be replaced there. What more information do you have on this?
Indeed, yesterday many media sources gave to many media that the soldiers want more weapons to fight against terrorism. They are also claiming that some of the leaders, especially the director of the intelligence of Burkina Faso, resigned. And they also claim that some of the officials will give up their positions. That's what I can say at the time being.
And in response to this insecurity, the government has imposed a curfew. What is the latest on that situation there?
The situation about
the curfew that's been imposed.
Right now, we can't say that it's a cup. We're waiting for the declaration that the mutineers say they will give, and after this declaration, we can confirm or not. And yesterday there was a curfew. There was a curfew in the evening time, and the curfew goes from 8 p.m. to 5:30 a.m. And yesterday, the people of Ouagadougou especially respected the curfew. And during the evening time, all the city was empty. People went home just after the match of Burkina Faso versus Gabon.
All right, Lucien, thank you very much for those updates. Local journalist Lucien Kambu Malba joining us live from Burkina Faso. Well, let's delve deeper into this story. Political tensions have existed in Burkina Faso for months now. Asta Tal takes a closer look at the reason behind the continued protests.
For months, protesters have taken to the streets of Burkina Faso. The call of demonstrators has remained the same, for President Roch Marc Christian Kabore to resign. Calls for his resignation come due to what protesters see as a failure to stop the growing militant attacks in the country. Burkina Faso faces a security challenge of intercommunal conflict as well as jihadist attacks, with groups linked to Al-Qaeda and ISIL operating in the country. But President Kabore is facing more than just a civilian-led opposition. Earlier this month, 8 soldiers were arrested for conspiring against the government. Authorities allege the soldiers were looking to destabilize institutions. Military camps and personnel have increasingly become a target in jihadist attacks. Kabore has made attempts to quiet calls for his resignation. In December, Kabore reshuffled both his cabinet and several military posts. This included replacing the then military chief and the resignation of his then Prime Minister, Christophe Dabiré. The government has also repeatedly shut down mobile internet services following protest. Despite this, members of the opposition and civil society groups continue to call for more protest. Asta Tal, CGTN.
Now, authorities in the Democratic Republic of Congo say they've rescued more than 200 people who drowned in the Congo River last Sunday. The passengers were traveling aboard a boat that capsized at night. CGTN's Chris Ochamringa has more now from Bandaka.
A team of volunteers has been searching for survivors of a boat accident that occurred on the Congo River in the northwest of the DRC. They only managed to recover the wreckage of the wooden boat. Hopes of finding more survivors have been fading, but the local officials say they had earlier rescued some of the passengers who were on that boat.
More than 200 people have been rescued from that accident. We also got some people who died. There was a child and a woman and other people.
Initial reports had indicated that 180 people were missing, but the authorities refuted that figure. Boat accidents are common on the Congo River. Last year, more than 60 people were reported dead and many others missing after the boat they were in capsized in Bandaka. The government has warned of taking stern action against boat owners who flout navigation standards, but the accidents keep happening. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Bandaka, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Well, the safety of water transport in the Democratic Republic of Congo has once again come under the spotlight after a boat capsized in the Congo River. The African country experiences such tragedies almost every year. CGTN's Enoch Sikolia highlights some of the accidents in the DRC that caught global attention.
Boats capsizing in rivers and lakes of the Democratic Republic of Congo is not something new. Every year, a number of boats sink into the water bodies, leading to the loss of hundreds of lives. The latest accident happened 4 months after over 50 people died following the capsizing of a makeshift vessel on the Congo River in October last year. The vessel was 9 traditional wooden canoes, known locally as pirogues, all tied together. Boat accidents are common in the vast and mineral-rich country as these vessels are often overloaded with passengers and goods. Passengers often do not wear life jackets. In February 2021, at least 60 people died after a vessel carrying over 700 people sank in the Congo River near a village in Maindombe province. This happened only a month following the drowning of 3 people after a passenger boat capsized in Lake Kivu. In May 2020, 10 people, including an 8-year-old girl, died after the leisure boat they were traveling in capsized in Lake Kivu. The tragedy stretched as far as the beginning of the decade as well as the millennium. In September 2010, close to 100 people died in the Democratic Republic of Congo after 2 boats capsized in separate incidents. One of the boats was carrying up to 300 people when it caught fire on the Kasai River near the border with Angola. A few months earlier, in July 2010, more than 135 people died after a boat capsized in the western province of Bandundu. The biggest tragedy happened in November 2003 after a ferry carrying 290 people sank. Over 200 people died in the accident. Enoch Sikolia, CGTN.
Well, for more on this, we're now joined from London by Ifesinachi Okafor-Yarwood, who's a lecturer in sustainable development at the University of St. Andrews. Ifesinachi, thank you for joining us. The Democratic Republic of Congo, as we've been hearing, has had a long history of deadly boat accidents. Why is this the case?
Thank you so much for the question. So this is happening clearly due to the poor conditions of the ships, including overloads, lack of safety measures, nighttime travel, and a lot of the time, sometimes you can also say due to weather conditions. But ultimately, given the place of a government in ensuring maritime safety, we would say that this is primarily due to lack of implementation of the existing regulations, and also the fact that perhaps the law does not necessarily commensurate with today's reality. Just to put things in context, the current maritime transport law is governed by Ordinance Law 6698 of the March 14th, 1966. It's over 55 years old. And so you have to ask yourself whether it aligns with today's reality. And even with that, how is it being implemented? So for example, nighttime traveling and overloading of ships is not supposed to be happening, but then the implementation of these laws is obviously a problem, because given the extensive nature of some of these incidents, one would ask, what are the implementation agencies doing about investigating further and ensuring that ships that are not seaworthy do not convey people?
Right, and looking at solutions, then what measures can the DRC take to improve the safety of travelers on its rivers?
One of the most important measures, of course, would be to ensure that the existing regulation, even though we recognize that it needs to be updated, it needs to be implemented. So it means that implementing agencies have to be provided with the necessary resources that they need to be able to, conduct on-the-spot checks and then ensure that unseaworthy ships are not conveying people. But importantly, it tells us that, the frequency of incident tells us that the government needs to be investing in maritime transport. A lot of the times in the African continent, especially in Central Africa, there's a lot of interest in investing in the blue economy, but very much, much less on maritime transport. I feel that there's a lot of opportunity for the government and the private sector to look into investing in maritime transport and then be able to ensure that people are able to travel safely. And with that investment also comes with ensuring that enforcement agencies are able to enforce the existing regulation. And that would also ensure that hopefully when this kind of incidents happen, we're not going to have much casualty because all the safety checks would have been in place, including passengers having life jackets, for example.
All right. Thank you very much for your insights there. Ifesinachi Okafor-Yarwood, who's a lecturer at the University of St. Andrews in London, joining us live there. Well, it's time for us to take a short break. Here's what's coming up on Africa Live. On the International Day of Education, we look at challenges facing students and teachers alike in Somalia and Sierra Leone. Welcome back. Now, the world is marking the International Day of Education. In Somalia, conflict, flooding and drought have disrupted the education of hundreds of students in the Hiran region. Some have been displaced, cutting short their learning journey, while others have been forced to stay at home after failing to raise school fees. Mohammed Kahir reports from the capital, Mogadishu.
This school in Somalia's agricultural town of Beledweyne is an example of the push for education. But in the past 3 years, the population of the students have been dropping significantly.
The number of students at the school was approximately 1,500 and above, but they are about 900 or 1,000 in the past 3 years due to the challenges of recurrent flooding and drought that displaced them in safer areas, while some were unable to manage school fees.
Most of the students at this school for internally displaced children also do not have basic tools for education. They rely on aid agencies who are facing shortage of funds.
The students you see here don't have basic education tools such as desks. They don't have proper classrooms for studying. All they have are these classrooms made out of hot iron sheets. They are from poor families but committed to study and become better in the society.
The Regional Education Network is worried about the decline in enrollment in education institutions.
Over 1,500 students' education was cut short by conflict, drought and famine in this region last year alone. Some were displaced to other areas while some could not afford the school fees. And if urgent measures are not put in place, it will have a great impact on the future generations.
Most of Somalia's annual budget is allocated to defense and security management due to the constant attacks by the armed group Al-Shabaab. Other significant sectors such as social services also receive considerable share. But experts say there is need for special attention to the ailing education sector in the country. Mohammed Kahir, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
Well, this year's theme of the International Day of Education is Changing Course, Transforming Education. With COVID-19, teachers have endured tough times due to the prolonged closure of schools. Some have been laid off while others have gone without salaries. Eric Kawa reports on challenges teachers in Sierra Leone have faced during and after the lockdown there.
Teachers play a significant role in the education sector, and the challenges they face are many. COVID-19 has made the situation tougher. With many countries in Africa, lockdowns and closure of schools, teachers here in Sierra Leone faced a lot more challenges. What does the International Day of Education mean to the teachers in Sierra Leone? We find out.
I feel very proud. Let them continue to find solutions to the problem teachers are facing. Because some of this, they do the celebration, by the end of the day, we see the same problem revolving around teachers, especially in terms of salary, in terms of incentives. Teachers are lack of that.
When Sierra Leone confirmed its first COVID-19 case in March 2020, learning institutions were immediately shut down to contain the virus. After 3 months of closures, schools reopened in July that year. Teachers also went through tough times during lockdowns. Margaret Sundu Thoronka is one of them.
When we have lockdown, you don't have to go to anybody. You stay indoors. If you don't have food, you will not eat. So I just have to go to friends and family so that I can get something I can keep in the house.
According to the World Economic Forum, students now risk losing $17 trillion in lifetime earnings in present value, or about 14% of today's global GDP, because of COVID-19 related school closures and economic shocks.
Some of the children were staying indoors, even the teachers also, they were staying indoors. And eventually some of them get pregnant, especially the girl child. And the boys, they were not in contact with their books. So some of them they take to drugs.
With the International Day of Education being set aside to look at educational issues around the globe, teachers in Sierra Leone hope their condition of service and welfare will be improved. Eric Kawa, CGTN, Sierra Leone.
Well, let's shift our focus to South Africa, where Portals of Migration is an art exhibition by South African artist Thabang Lehobaye. That's part of an ongoing series exploring the inhabitants of Johannesburg and the city itself as a subject. CGTN's Yolisan Jamela tells us more.
The exhibition comes at an opportune time when South Africans are fast becoming agitated with the issue of migrants, especially those migrants that are here without legal papers. Thabang Lehobie is well aware of this current discourse in the country and shares his views.
So I think as Africans, as we see streams of people moving into cities and seeing urban sprawls, we need to really ask ourselves a question. How do we accommodate people who seek refuge in other places? How do we accommodate as Africans people who are destitute, that at a certain period we might have been in a similar situation? If we look at such issues in retrospect, I believe it is where we can find solutions instead of pointing fingers.
In his current exhibition displayed here, the artist aims to challenge the viewer to step into the work and to see themselves walk the streets of Johannesburg, a city that is often full of migrants. Migrants who are seeking better employment and earnings prospects.
In my work, I explore Joburg everyday street scenes. I go into the everyday street scenes of Joburg and the people, really capturing moments in time in Joburg, the sunsets, the street sweeper by the corner, just like your everyday scenes. Joburg as a city was built on migrant labor, and a lot of people come in and out of Joburg.
Thabang's art is so joyous. I think when you look at it, then you relive Johannesburg or the CBD as we used to know it. And I think it brings back memories, fond memories of the past and dreams of the future. And I think with the beautiful color that he uses in his works, they are just works that you can't help falling in love with.
While many in his industry have suffered enormously as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, Lehobie says this period has actually had quite a positive impact on him and his artwork.
The pandemic has affected my work positively in a huge way. I have managed to find a lot of time to do more work. I work full-time as a designer, and it's amazing how those two things actually feed off each other. The conceptual side of design require you to really step back a little. The art side of things require you as well to really look around. And in that way, I've found a really good balance between the two and managed to be really, really productive.
To illustrate his art, Thabang Lehobie experiments with various techniques using acrylics and charcoal. Yolisan Jamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, it's time for us to take a short break. We'll be back with all the latest in business.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back. Let's start things off in Nigeria, where the country's National Economic Council has recommended a substantial increase in the price of petrol in the country. If the recommendation is approved by President Muhammadu Buhari, the price of petrol, which is currently sold at about 40 cents per litre, will jump to about $1 per litre. That's effective next month. But as our correspondent Tesem Akende reports, some experts are warning that the petrol hike will be disastrous for the majority in the country.
The price of petrol has been a contentious issue in Nigeria for decades, and it looks set to double in the next few weeks. The Nigerian government has been subsidizing fuel since the 1970s, when the country's refineries became largely moribund and they had to rely on expensive imports. It spent over $2 billion in subsidies between January and October last year alone. Authorities say eliminating the subsidies will ensure fair competition in the market pricing for petrol. Governors in the country in May last year recommended the same increase, but it was rejected after widespread public opposition. But the National Economic Council, which is headed by the nation's vice president, has advised that the price increase starts in February. The NEC claims the move will save the government hundreds of millions of dollars each month and help boost public finances. But experts say there are fears the increase in petrol price could be disastrous for the country's poorest people. More than 80 million Nigerians live below $1.90 a day. The government has pledged to fix the defunct refineries to help lower the cost of petrol. Nigeria is the largest oil-producing nation in Africa, yet it imports its petroleum products from other countries with better infrastructure. A fuel subsidy has been promised to help lessen the blow for some of those who can least afford the price rise. Tassim Akende, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Elsewhere, Tunisia is facing an unprecedented crisis in the production, distribution and inflation of table eggs. In 2021, the production of eggs meant for consumption recorded a 5.5% drop compared to 2020. This as prices increased by between 30 to 50% in some local markets. Adnan Chawashi has the latest from Tunis.
Olfa Bouzid is a grocery shop manager in the suburbs of the capital city Tunis. She says that table eggs are either unavailable or very expensive. The purchasing power of consumers has been hit hard by the country's rising inflation.
It is hard to get my usual stock of table eggs. There were so many successive tariff increases that groceries and consumers were disoriented. When I don't have eggs, people don't come to this small shop, and it affects my daily revenue.
Tunisia's staple food is based on table eggs. I cannot afford to buy table eggs for my whole family. What are we supposed to eat if this important product is out of price?
For several weeks now, the owners of small table egg production facilities have been rallying across Tunisia. The players say they are not able to shoulder the financial burden in an increasingly competitive industry. They are also decrying the rise in costs generated by feeding poultry.
As small independent egg producers, we cannot compete with the commercial egg industry led by some industrialists who monopolize the whole market. Hundreds of small producers are facing big losses and going bankrupt, while industrialists are taking over to control production costs and impose prices. The state must intervene before egg prices go up 100%.
The Tunisian Consumer Organization says the nation's table egg supply will be affected this year if the Trade Department does not put in place new price control measures to regulate the market.
The Trade Department has set the maximum profit margins so that consumers can buy eggs at an affordable price. The authorities cannot abandon small egg producers. Protecting independent small egg producers and consumers is a top priority.
The Agriculture Department announced that Tunisia's monthly production of eggs for consumption amounts to 150 million table eggs, which represents 100% of the national production capacity. The Trade Ministry has urged egg producers to boost production in order to increase their strategic stock in the country. According to the National Observatory of Agriculture, the Trade Ministry has stepped up its control measures to deal with the persistent problem of speculation on table eggs, while the price of this product is theoretically capped. In December 2021 alone, 6.1 million eggs were seized by the economic control agents. Adnan Chawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
And here's what's coming up on Africa Live Sport. Nigeria's Super Eagles knocked out of the Africa Cup of Nations by Tunisia. And thousands take part in the Great Ethiopian Run in the capital, Addis Ababa.